Okay, next shit. So settlement hierarchy and services. The hierarchy would be when you place things in order of importance, okay? So think of like a king and a queen. It's a hierarchy. Like a monarchy, a hierarchy, the king is at the top and like a peasant living in the village would be at the bottom. Anyway, so hierarchy, placing things in order of importance. The sphere of influence is pretty much the distance people would travel from to access a service. So say you want to go to the casino in Monaco, someone from Nice would, like, people from Nice would drive to Monaco to use this casino. But someone from, say, Marseille, which is super far away, they wouldn't drive here. So the sphere of influence would be like, of the casino in Monaco would be Nice, you know? That's how far someone would travel just to get a service. The service is a facility offered to people, so like a school, a shop, a cinema, whatever. A range would be the number or type of different services, right? Like a range of services. So a threshold population is the minimum amount of people that are needed for a service to be offered and to remain open. Like you can't open a shop if no one's going to go to it. So a threshold population is how many people you need so that you can keep your shop alive. For example, if you open a supermarket, you would need minimum, say like 1,000 people to go there, so that you get enough money to let it run and people actually buying your stuff. Okay, and in services, when you buy shit, they are classed into two different categories: high order goods and low order goods. So high order goods, think of them as like high end, okay? So they're expensive. And people would buy them less frequently. So think of like TVs or stereos. Like, people wouldn't buy this every day, yeah? They're high-end, so they're high-order goods. And they're called also sometimes comparison goods because people would go to many different services, so different shops, to compare prices or quality. Or, say, if you want to buy a TV, you would go to Fnac, you would go to Bang & Olufsen, you know, you'd go to different shops to just see the different types and prices. So you compare. So they're called comparison goods. Okay, then you have low order goods, so low end stuff, so cheaper things, so that people buy it every day. So bread, you know, just food, so groceries, you know, water, milk, toilet paper, that kind of stuff. And it's also sometimes called convenience good because they're convenient. You need them on a daily basis. So low order goods, you buy it every day. High order goods, you buy it not every day. Okay, and the hierarchy of a settlement, there's, you know, this is a settlement hierarchy pyramid triangle shit. As you can see at the top, there's a conurbation, so it's an order of the size. So first here, the smallest, the second smallest, third smallest, you know, it goes up. So it starts with isolated dwelling, hamlet, village, small town, large town, city, conurbation, which, like we said before, is when two cities or two towns merge to form it. Okay. And yeah. So yeah. And also, as it goes up, the higher population and also more settlement, more services, I mean. Yeah. Okay, and it depends on three variables: the size of population, the range and number of services, and the sphere of influence. That's how you make that pyramid. And obviously, these three variables are very much linked, alright? For services to be offered, there needs to be a minimum threshold population, like we said, the minimum amount of people needed to keep a service. And when services are then offered, more people will come. And as more people are attracted, more services are offered, and the sphere of influence increases. So when you move down the settlement hierarchy, the number of settlements increase. For example, you only get one capital city near the top of the hierarchy in each country, but you get thousands of isolated buildings near the bottom in every country. So decrease in frequency means how many there are. So say in France, there are going to be like 1,000 isolated dwellings, maybe 100 hamlets, 90 villages, 80, 70, 61. You know, it's less and less. I mean, you can see here it's fat, here it's kind of getting thinner, anorexic. You get what I mean. There are less conurbations than there are isolated dwellings. Uses and land use models. So there's the CBD, which, as you hopefully know, is the Central Business District. And this is basically the area in the middle of urban areas where there tends to be a concentration of retail, so, you know, shops, and commercial, as in business land uses. So say like the CBD, it's right in the middle. So for example, in New York, the CBD will have like Wall Street, Fifth Avenue, has all the main shops, and it's the CBD basically. The transition zone is the area between the CBD and the largely residential suburbs. The suburbs are located on the kind of outskirts of a place. The CBD is right in the middle. And transition, it means change. It means like kind of the middle zone. So that's how you can remember. Transition zone is the area between CBD and the largely residential suburbs. Usually, this used to be an area of industry. Like it would have heavy industry, so all the factories and stuff. But nowadays, industry has relocated, and these areas are being regenerated into mixed land use areas. So they can be residential, commercial, retail, I don't know, anything, even entertainment. So it still does have industry, but not as much. So the suburbs, like we just spoke of, they're the areas near the edge of an urban area that has a concentration of residential land use. So in suburbs, usually like the main function would be residential. There will also be some recreational land use, like cinemas, and there'll also be maybe some retail and educational services, but usually that you travel to the CBD, like to the main places, not the suburbs for schools and shit. Okay. Then there's the rural-urban fringe, which is basically the boundary between an urban area and a rural area. So it's the fringe, like in between it. So this area is demanded. Sorry, small typo. It's demanded by multiple land uses. So in the rural-urban fringe, you would have agriculture, recreational services, residential, retail, and industrial. Since there's a huge demand for different services in this place, there can be conflict. Okay. So you need to know more vocabulary. So a greenfield site. Think of it as green, nature, great, new, okay? Because it's a land that's never been built on before. So no one ever built on it. And yeah. Now, before greenfield sites often were used for agriculture. Right, exactly because they weren't built on, so you could build on the ground because there are no buildings there. So nowadays, many countries, for instance, England, are trying to restrict, so make less, the amount of building on greenfield sites. Okay, they don't want people to build on it. And they're encouraging people to build on brownfield sites. Which brings us to the next one. Brownfield sites. Think brown, growth, used, because that's what it is. It's a land that has been built on previously, okay? People have already built on it. But it's now abandoned and become derelict, which is just another word for abandoned. And yeah, most commonly, brownfield sites are former factories found in the transition zone. And we'll talk about the pros and cons of each one of these. So basically, greenfield site is like the never been built on, and the government wants people to build on the brownfield sites, which have already built on, but they're new. Like, as in, you can build on them again, like you can renovate it. Okay, greenbelt. Greenbelts are protected areas of land. Like, you know how there are protected areas for animals? Well, there's also just ones for, like, plant or whatever. So they're protected areas of land around large urban areas. They have been used by the UK government to try and protect greenfield sites and to promote building on brownfield sites. So, yeah. So a greenbelt could possibly be on a greenfield site, so no one can build on it. Okay, then there's a term, urban sprawl or urban growth, which is the spread or growth of an urban area into the rural-urban fringe. So say right into the middle of a place, so when it's super urban, if it continues growing, then it will grow out into the rural-urban fringe, which is the place between rural and urban land. Think like of LA or whatever. It started small, and then there's like the suburbs like Beverly Hills and all that shit. Okay. Now, there are two different land models. The first one is the Burgess, I don't even know how to pronounce it, just think burgers, and instead of the R at the end, you add another S, so Burgess Model. It's called concentric because here, that's the shape of it. Concentric, it means when it's like a circular thing at the beginning, it just spreads out, but circularly, okay? So, this model, it's like these land use models, they basically describe how a place is gonna be, like a city. And with the Burgess model, they say that the commercial area, so where all the shops are and stuff, would be in the center of the city, and also the businesses. So it would be in the center of the city, and which is called the CBD, the Central Business District. And an area of factories would be in the transition zone, okay? Like we spoke of transition zone, because nowadays it's not really that much like it, but this is kind of an old model, but you gotta know anyway. So in the transition zone, there would be factories and stuff. And then outside of that, there would be houses. And the further away you move from the transition zone, the better quality the houses will be. And the model, it's super simple, and it was only based on one city, and it's largely out of date, as periods of deindustrialization and regeneration have changed many urban land uses. So yeah, you gotta know it. So, quick recap. This is the Burgess model. Inside, you've got the CBD, the Central Business District, so you've got lots of businesses in here. Then you've got the transitional zone, which has factories and industry and stuff. Then here you have, then this is all residential, so houses, but here it'll be low class, middle class, high class. And the reasons for this are, well, who wants to be near, like, old industrial places with, like, dirty, polluted area and shit. So only poor people will live there. Then the middle people will live further, but still kind of close to it. And the rich people are gonna live in the suburbs and not be close to pollution and shit. 'Cause they want nicer houses and stuff, so yeah. Okay, and then there's a second model. It's called the Hoyt Model. And it's similar to the Burgess model, but not really. It has some differences. So firstly, yes, like the first one, it said that there's a large commercial area in the center, which is called the CBD, right? And they say that industry often developed along major transport routes instead of just circularly. So if there's like a railway, a canal, or a road, that the industry would go along it, right? And then poorer residential areas were actually focused near the industry, and richer residential areas tended to grow further away from polluting industrial areas, so like the previous one. But also this model, just like the first one, isn't totally accurate because many changes have since taken place. Right. So quick recap, like in the first one, in the Hoyt model, the CBD has all the business. Then factories and industries will actually not go like circularly, but they will follow a good transport route. So like there would probably be a really good road here, a highway, which is why the industry, so the transitional zone, grew out there. And you will see, like I explained before, the low-class residential places will be kind of around the industry. And then the medium-class residential places will be kind of here. And the high-class residential will go out in one big line here. I'm sorry, I have a really dry throat right now because I'm like talking since an hour. Okay, the rural-urban fringe. This is the boundary between the urban area, towns and cities, and the rural area, countryside. I've already explained this, but I'm just recapping. Okay, so many people want to work and live in the rural-urban fringe. Okay? But because of this, there are many different groups that come into conflict, so they argue about how you should use the land in the rural-urban fringe. So, for example, house developers, house buyers, farmers, hikers, cyclists, road builders, factories, supermarkets, businesses, or even science parks will maybe disagree. For example, farmers and industry will probably disagree over how the land should be used. So industry might want to build on a farmer's land to, make a company, make a factory, but farmers wouldn't want this because they wouldn't want pollution to disturb crops and animals. So, yeah, many arguments could come about from it. Okay, types of housing. So there's many different kind of houses. So there's council housing. This is housing that belongs to the government, and they're given to people who are unemployed, okay? So they can't afford nice housing, so they get council housing. And this usually has a low rent, okay? So it's cheap. Council housing, it's governmental. Then you've got detached housing, which is a single house that's not attached to any other house. So my house is detached, okay, because it's not linked to any other house. And detached houses will usually have a garden and a drive, like for the car to come on. Like, I have a garden, okay? It's a detached housing. And they're usually found in the suburbs. What you have is no, never mind. These are still houses. We're not talking about flats. Okay, semi-detached housing. It's when only two houses are joined together, okay? They usually have individual gardens and drives, okay? They're normally like the detached housings found in suburbs. They're attached just on one side, right? Because it's just two, so each has one side where it's free. Okay, and this is kind of similar to what you have, but it's a house, it's not an apartment. So they're terraced. So think of like a terrace, it's linked, right? So it's a long line of attached houses, okay? So they're all attached. These are typical in old industrial cities of the UK, right? And because, think of brick houses all in one line, very ugly. It's for workers, basically. And they're normally found in transition zone area, and because that's where there would have been all the factories, and those houses would have been where the factory workers would have lived, right? They were very basic houses, though, like, often without electricity, and the toilet would be outside. And by now, many of terraced houses have been knocked down or just improved so that people can actually live there, okay? And then there's another housing type called a bungalow, and this is a house with only one floor. They're very popular amongst old people who find it hard to use stairs, or even handicapped people. They can be detached or semi-detached. They're normally found in suburbs. Okay, in the recent years, more people have wanted houses, so the demand has increased. Even though the population, for instance in the UK, is fairly stable. So the population hasn't crazily increased, but the demand for houses has. Why? Okay, there are multiple reasons for this. Firstly, the sizes of families are now smaller, so so the average number of people per house is lower, right? So this means that since the average house number per people is lower, there need to be more houses. So there are more divorces and more single people. So there are more houses needed, because if you're divorced, you don't want to live with your ex-husband, so you need another house. Also, people tend to leave home younger, so they need their own houses, right? For instance, in the old days, you would stay with your parents till you're like 30. And when you find your wife or husband, that's when you move out. But nowadays, you move out when you're 18. So more people need houses, because people tend to leave home younger. Also, there are many migrants, and often migrants are single, and they need their own house. Shit. That should say THEIR. Ignore that awful spelling mistake. So yeah, many migrants come in, and they need their own houses too. Also, people get married later, since more people focus on their careers first. So, they need, again, THEIR. I'm sorry. I copied and pasted this from my website, so don't blame me. So, people are getting married later, so they need their own house for longer, okay? Because they haven't met each other yet, or what? Or they choose not to live together, okay? And also, many old houses, like we just spoke of terrace houses, are considered to be uninhabitable. So, and people would live there. So they need new houses, because their old one, you can't just live in that. So you need more houses, because they want to move out. Okay. Also, old people choose to live on their own instead of going to a care home or living with their family. So again, more houses are needed. Okay. So, since, as we spoke before about the rural-urban fringe, we're going to talk about it again. So, many people want to live there, so there's constantly a growth. And you gotta control this, because you don't want it to get too polluted and stuff. So, because of urban sprawl and because of the loss of greenfield sites is such a big problem, there have been many suggestions to solve it. Greenbelts, urban wedges, brownfield sites, and housing density. They're going to be explained now. So, the first one, greenbelts. Like we said before, they are areas of land around an urban area that is protected from development. So, you see urban areas, the pink areas, so say here, London is the urban area. So, the green belt, you're not allowed to build on it. It's a protected area. Okay? And the idea is to stop greenfield sites being built on. and the alternative, like brownfield sites, being used. So a green belt would be on a greenfield site, okay? Urban wedges. Also, some planners suggested that urban growth, so when the place grows from the center, should be allowed to take place in wedges, okay? These are, the in between the different kind of land uses. So, by building in wedges from the CBD, it will ensure that some green areas are protected near the CBD and throughout the city. Okay. Then you have brownfield sites. So, kind of like we said before, the used places. And the government wants you to build on them because, they don't want you to build on greenfield sites. So, in the UK, the government want over 60% of new houses to be built on them, so to protect rural greenfield areas. However, many brownfield sites are heavily polluted, so it's expensive to build on it, and there are shortages of brownfield sites in areas where demand for houses is greatest. So, because you can't really pick where you want to go with brownfield sites. For example, the southeast of the UK, where most people want to make houses, there aren't many brownfield sites. Okay, another suggestion is housing density. Another proposition is to increase the housing density of all future housing developments. So, the UK government encourages all developments to have between 30 and 50 houses per hectare. By doing this, less land will be destroyed. So basically having the houses be more close to each other, so that less space is wasted and you don't need to build on greenfield sites. Okay. If you want to build on a greenfield sites, there are many advantages. Firstly, the land was never used, so you don't need to clean up anything, you don't need to tear down a building. No, it's completely fresh. Also, it's usually near the rural-urban fringe, so there are good transport links, right? Which is advantageous, because you can drive anywhere. Okay, then, also near the rural-urban fringe, there's usually less traffic congestion, which is great. No traffic. Also, with greenfield sites, you can usually choose the size, which is important because if you want to expand, so build another house, or if you're a factory and you want to expand it, like make it larger, you need a large size. And since greenfield sites are very large and unbuilt, you can very easily expand, and that's a good thing. However, there are some disadvantages. Firstly, you would come into conflict with other land users, like farmers, right? And also, many greenfield sites are protected by the government, so you couldn't even build there if you wanted to. Also, sites, they may be less accessible by public transport, because, they've never been used, so why would there be a road to go there? No, sorry, I take that back. Ignore that. It's because they're in the rural-urban fringe. It's kind of far away from, like, the central area of the city or whatever. So there may not be buses passing it, so it may be less accessible by public transport. Also, if you try to build on a greenfield site, there may be public protests, right? Imagine hippie environmentalists. Okay, I'm quickly going to drink because my throat is so goddamn dry. Ugh, okay, I'm sorry. Also, brownfield sites, like we were talking before, the used places, there are some advantages. Okay, firstly, to buy the land, it's very cheap, okay? Because it's been used already, so it's cheap. Imagine, like, when you buy second-hand clothes, it's cheaper than if you buy fresh from a store. Fresh, that just sounds weird, but you get what I'm saying. Okay, they're often located near the central business district, which is good because you're close to places. Also, the government wants you to build on them, so they might give you incentives or benefits. Also, they can easily be accessed by public transport since it's usually close to the CBD, so you can take a bus there and back or whatever. However, there are some disadvantages. That should say brownfield. I'm sorry. Okay, brownfield. Disadvantages of brownfield. So, firstly, the land is usually polluted because it's already used, so you must clean it up, and that's expensive, okay? So say there's, been a factory built on it. Well, they may have polluted the lake next to it, or maybe you don't want to build that on that factory, so you totally need to tear it down and start fresh. Well, that costs money, okay? Also, with brownfield sites, you can't always pick where you want them because, they may not be there. They're not always located where you want them to be because they are not usually in the rural-urban fringe. Also, there's not always room for expansion because they're generally pretty small and they're like sparse. They're located in lots of different places. So, there may not be room for you to expand. Also, they're not always the shape you want them to be. So, yeah. So, when you have retail, so shops, you can change the location of them, right? You can put them wherever. But traditionally, most shops are concentrated in the central business district. However, in the recent decades, there has been a trend of shopping areas moving to the rural-urban fringe. Below are some of the reasons why they have moved. Okay. Firstly, let's list of the advantages for retail in the central business district, so why they haven't moved yet. Or why they would be in the central business district still. So, most in the CBD, there are most public transport links, so trains, subways, and buses, because they tend to head towards the CBD, right? So, even from outside, you can go to the CBD with public transport, okay? So this is good for retail in the central business district because many people can go to it. Also, there are many nice buildings in the central business district, so the area has more character. Also, often other associated services that you can visit at the same time would be there. So banks, restaurants, post offices, or even libraries. Because it's good because, if you're in the CBD, your shop, say your cookie shop, may be next to a bank. So someone, for instance, would go into the bank and then they would go quickly for a cookie. So that it's good that you're close to other businesses because then people might just see you and just be like, oh, I want to go there. However, there are some disadvantages. Firstly, there's not a lot of space because it's very concentrated. So they're usually unable to expand, okay? Not always a problem, but it is kind of a disadvantage. So also, because there's not a lot of space, the price for the land is extremely expensive. Think of Monaco. Since there's little space, it's expensive to live here. Also, but if you're in Canada where there's huge amounts of space, it's not as expensive. Also, New York is expensive. Just the smaller, the higher the rent. So, yeah. So, if you want to have a service there, so for retail, so a shop, the rents would be extremely high to be in the CBD. Also, the roads leading to the CBD, they're usually small and not designed for cars. So, yeah, it's a disadvantage. And there is also limited parking, so not a lot of cars can park there, which is not good. Also, some CBDs have high crime rates, which scares some customers from going to this area. Okay. Also, like I just mentioned about the small roads, it's difficult for deliveries of shops because, there are small roads, so they may be hard and or delayed. Okay, then if you want to have retail, so your shops in rural urban fringe, there are also some advantages and disadvantages. So let's go first with the pros. So the advantages. So there's plenty of land in the rural urban fringe, so shopping centers are able to expand very easily. Okay, because there's lots of land. Also, because the land is available, because it's often flat and easy to build on, the rents are normally cheaper. Okay, there's lots of land, it's flat, easy to build, so it will be cheaper to buy or rent. Okay, and since there's extra land, it means that big malls can build huge parking spaces for lots of people to come. Think of, I don't know, you would have huge malls on the outside. You wouldn't find a huge mall right in the middle of a city. You'd find it kind of on the outskirts, and there's always a huge parking place, So yeah, that's why it's good to build in the rural urban fringe for shops. Also, there are often main roads near the rural urban fringe, so it's easy to access the shopping centers in cars, which is good for the shop, right? Because lots of people can come in cars. And it's also possible to make the shopping centers very, very large, okay? And to put them all under one roof, eliminating any issues of bad weather. So, because if you have shops on the outside, if it's raining, people won't want to go shopping because they always need to go outside for 2 seconds between shops and they would get wet or something. If it's a mall, there's not a problem, okay? because you can make shopping centers in rural urban fringes, which is good. Also, it's easier for them to make or receive deliveries, okay? So when they get new clothes or something, it's very easy since there are large roads and stuff. However, there are some disadvantages. Ignore that prose shit. I'm gonna pay more attention with the editing when I make it for the next topic. I'm sorry. So, disadvantages to make your shops in the rural urban fringe. Firstly, customers that don't have cars would find it hard to get there because, sometimes usually there are not very many public transportation possibilities in the rural urban fringe. However, some retailers, so the people that own the shops, may develop public transport links. So it's up to you if you want to make it a problem or not. Also, it can cause environmental damage if you build in the rural urban fringe, as greenfield sites are destroyed there if you build on it, because then they're not greenfield sites anymore, they become brownfield sites. Also, although the new shopping center may create new jobs, other jobs may be lost in the central business district as other shopping areas are forced to go out of business. Okay? And also, having your shops in the rural urban fringe encourages greater use of cars since it's so far away. So it creates traffic congestion and more pollution.